Welcome and namaste, everyone. I'm glad you're here with me again today as we get very, very close to the new year, as we read episode 6 from the book, Thanks for the Yellow Roses. I'm hopeful that you're having a wonderful Christmas season, a holiday season, that you're celebrating life, the richness of life with all you are, and you're loving yourself as well as others to the hilt. The title of today's chapter is The Jewel in the Lotus. The Jewel in the Lotus. It's a shorter short story, but a fun one. I had just begun a new book, new to me that is, an enlightening piece on creative meditation by Grace Cook. She illumines with teachings from White Eagle, the same Indian spiritual teacher that brings Jesus the Christ to light and the most profound understanding of that which comes to us from investing ourselves in meditation. I have no earthly idea why I'm suddenly moved away from this intriguing book and meditation, a critical pathway to the inner straits of the divine, but I am. Actually, the truth of it for me is that it's not some earthly idea that has created my movement, but rather the inordinate power of inspiration that has me now at this computer keyboard. Just a dozen pages into this moving account of meditational bliss, a distant but nonetheless profound memory comes to light. Its power is that compelling and that empowering for me. The events that led to the tale took place on the Milford Track, one of the stunning walking trails on the South Island of New Zealand, some 32 miles over what is known as the Southern Alps. My then spouse, Helen Jane, and I had committed to this adventure as part of our trip to honor her childhood dream of visiting Australia in all its splendor. As we traversed the tropical jungle floor along exotic and simple flower-bordered pathways, with backpacks carrying little more than the bare essentials strapped to our backs, not unlike burros trudging across the mountains to Machu Picchu, I couldn't help thinking that nothing in life's green acre could be any more beautiful than this. We trekked only a few miles the first night, just to gather with the other 30 or so others who had a similar agenda. Pardon me. Even that little jaunt filled my lungs with the freshest air I had breathed in years, and my heart filled to the brim with heavenly anticipation. After dinner that first night, we paired with another couple for the remainder of the trip. That is, we shared a room together. For 3 nights we were to be bunkmates, and as it often turns out, we became fast, lifelong friends. They were an English couple who spoke kind of funny. So it sounded to us, like we sounded to them, I'm sure. They both had a great sense of humor and were sterling conversationalists. The man of a couple was an endless tease and liked to pull everyone's leg. His wife, a sensible, plain-speaking woman of great character, would simply smilingly shake her head in what now had become accustomed acceptance of his shenanigans. But none of this really had anything to do with the real essence of this story. On the morning of our last day together, we had a warm, filling breakfast with extraordinarily yummy homemade oatmeal, eggs, crisp bacon, and all the trimmings. On this day, we were set to descend from the last of the mountains, and my legs were achingly testifying to what felt like unseemly abuse afflicted by the hundreds of sharp rocks and slippery boulders. My calves and the bottoms of my feet were on fire and crying for relief. Of course, the real testimony was to being out of shape for such a challenging activity as this one, and I was challenged, at least momentarily, to restructure my physical training regimen upon returning home, so this would never, ever happen again. As is often the case, the challenge left as quickly as it appeared, caused by an internal reminder that I needn't train for mountain climbing if I didn't intend to mountain climb again. In other words, I fooled myself. As we began down the last of the loose shale-strewn paths, I stopped momentarily to create a few memorable images with my camera, as though the ones that were already etching themselves on the lining of my heart wouldn't be enough already. I paused to replace the cover on my lens, knowing the footing would be uneasy at best, and I didn't want to risk damaging my lens on the camera should I have a spill. No longer than it took for this thought to leave my mind, I caught my toe on the edge of a rock and felt the weight of my knapsack flip me over, head over heels, landing on a huge boulder along the very edge of a recent rock slide. Had it not been for that boulder stopping me, I could easily have flipped over the side, tumbling a few hundred feet below. My half somersault completed itself with my knees slashing across other boulders on the way down, and my head crashed to an abrupt halt on the boulder to save my very life. To say I was stunned is a gross misrepresentation. Helen Jane rushed to my aid, or so I thought, but all I heard her say was something like, "Is it okay if I take your picture?" I can laugh at that now. Then, though, I was hardly wanted to laugh. Apparently, I hadn't heard her ask if I was right with the world. Good thing I wasn't clear-minded then, or my response might have been different from the one I delivered in somewhat groggy state. I think I'm okay. I just need a minute or two to collect myself. The most compelling thought running through my mind was how utterly clumsy it was of me to let that happen. I sometimes get self-critical when I'm really tired, and came to a quick understanding of both realizations. After bandaging my throbbing knee and giving my aching head a bit of comfort with a ready-made ice pack, we began afresh on our downward trek, with only my badly bruised eagle still to attend to. Disgust with myself began to rear its head again, and I heard this little voice inside me that often saves me from myself say, "Let yourself see how a pack mule would traverse this steep decline." Obedient to the command, I asked for the vision, and it wasn't a split second before the imaginary National Geographic scene unfolded. True to the nature of this beast of burden, he stepped carefully, first with one foot, slid it over the rock until it felt firm, and then stepped with the other foot, repeating the pattern time and time again. Slowly but surely, he felt his way down the slope. The donkey, even as experienced as he was, knew it was a treacherous descent and didn't rush a single thing about it. The even most spooky part of all this was that I came to see myself as that pack animal. Indeed, I had become the animal as I watched myself on the descent, placing one step carefully after another, taking the same precautions he would have under similar conditions. In the midst of all this, I heard a self-realization burst into presence. Wow. If this beast of burden was this cautious and aware of the danger, how could I expect more of myself than this? All at once, my highly critical self let up on me, and I felt an almost instantaneous burst of inner confidence and praise for waking up to the absolute truth of the matter, rather than bathing myself in self-pity and disgust any longer. A real teacher, this donkey was. As a willing student, I replicated the earlier guidance provided by the inner imagery for the remaining part of the descent, striking the last steps of the decline, now completely at peace with myself. Thank goodness. When we got to the bottom of the mountain, we stepped onto a several-mile stretch of narrow, winding pathway, matted with thousands of sharp, angular stone chips. My heart sank. It didn't take more than the first few steps before I heard others, both in front and back of me, whining about how their feet were in such pain that they didn't know how they'd make it to the very end. My feet and legs echoed those sentiments exactly, and I asked inwardly for strength in the form of a way to relieve the pain. No longer than it took to place one pained foot in front of the other, a handsome, black-haired, dark-eyed native Indian, adorned only in a breechcloth and moccasins, appeared in my mind's eye off to the right. His expression was one that usually accompanies a dry sense of humor, with a slight smile turned up at the corners of his mouth and a glint in his eye. I could hear his voice, clear as my own, clear as my own inner vision voice, of course, as he shook his head from side to side, feigning utter disbelief. Oh, you pale faces make things so dramatic. Simply let the moss be your feet. His words suddenly awakened me to the obvious all around me. On both sides of the path, for as far as I could see, were the most gorgeous carpets of lush, rich green moss. I stepped off to the side of the path and felt as though someone had affixed giant pillows to the bottoms of my feet. Needless to say, I had no trouble making it to the end of the trek. I felt immense gratitude and thanked my new native friend for the wisdom that saved me from the pain of my own short-sightedness and self-pity. Now, years later, I have come to the full understanding of those episodes. The jewel in the lotus is the inner understanding that comes from putting one's full faith in the inner voice, and that alone. And then being obedient to the grace, which is our sufficiency in all matters and circumstances. Well, there it is. I told you it was a short story, but I think about that and I get goosebumps still as to how that wonderful native man crept into my life and shared his wisdom with me. Wow, 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 wow. Well, okay, here we are at the end of another one. I look for little sayings to share with you at the end that we might share with one another. Here's one. It comes from the Life on Purpose movement. Note to self. You don't have to be tidier, thinner, funnier, or smarter. You don't have to be more assertive, more ambitious, more social, or more productive. We can keep growing, but you don't have to be more of anything in order to be enough. You already are enough. I'll read that again. Note to self. You don't have to be tidier, thinner, right? You don't have to be tidier, thinner, funnier, or smarter. You don't have to be more assertive, more ambitious, more social, or more productive. You can keep growing, of course, but you don't have to be more of anything in order to be enough. You already are enough. Well, there it is for this week's folks. I hope that you have something lovely planned, whether it's being by yourself in the solitude or being with friends to celebrate the coming of the new year. I wish you a wonderful end to this year, 2022, and a glowing, beautiful, sensuous start to the new year, 2023. I love you. Namaste.